When Ricky Nelson died in that tragic plane crash in 1985, most people believed he had nothing left. His divorce had drained $1 million from him. He was drowning in debt. His children were expected to inherit nothing but financial trouble. Then something unexpected happened. His brother discovered a hidden will. Lawyers started digging and found something shocking. Record companies had been stealing from Ricky for decades. What followed changed everything. His 4 children suddenly became millionaires. The settlement was so huge, even the judge couldn't believe it. But one son received nothing at all, and the reason why is absolutely jaw-dropping. Ricky Nelson was born on May 8, 1940, in Tenafly, New Jersey. But he wasn't just an ordinary child. His father, Ozzie Nelson, led a big band. His mother, Harriet Hilliard, was already a well-known actress. From day one, Ricky's life was in the public eye. While he was still in diapers, his family's radio show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, was already popular all over America. Unlike other kids who grew up in quiet neighborhoods, Ricky grew up around microphones and cameras. Dinner time could turn into a rehearsal. Vacations became episodes. It felt like he was living on a TV set all the time. Even simple, everyday moments seemed scripted. In 1949, at just 8 years old, Ricky joined the radio show with his brother David. While most boys his age were outside riding bikes or trading cards, Ricky was memorizing lines and earning paychecks. He became a star before reaching double digits. Audiences were charmed by his natural talent. By age 10, he was a household name, but fame came with the cost: no birthday parties, no school sports, just lights, cameras, and the pressure to perform. He didn't really get a normal childhood. Instead of playing in a park, he worked in a studio. Much of his early life was sacrificed to keep up the family's show business image. In 1941, the family moved to Los Angeles and settled into a cozy Cape Cod-style house at 1822 Camino Palomero. That home became more than just their house. It became a television icon, featured in countless episodes. Fans even drove by just to catch a glimpse of it. But behind the scenes, the house was more like a studio. Scripts were written there, and the living room was used for rehearsals. Ozzie ran everything like a business, and the kids were part of the machine. Their real lives became hard to separate from their TV characters. That mix of real and scripted life made the show incredibly popular, but for Ricky, it blurred the lines of reality. Ricky also struggled with serious asthma. It wasn't just occasional wheezing, it often kept him out of school, away from his friends, and even made simple things like walking across a room difficult. While other kids played outside, Ricky stayed in, reading or listening to music. It made him more thoughtful and quiet. He observed more than he spoke. That calm, intense personality later became part of his charm on screen, but underneath, he was just a lonely boy trying to feel normal. When the radio show started in 1944, Ozzie and Harriet had actors play their sons. But Ricky and David didn't like that. They wanted to play themselves. They pushed for it. By 1949, they were starring on the show as themselves. No one had done that before. It was a strange blend of real life turned into entertainment. It worked. Ratings soared, and fans became obsessed with the Nelson family. Ricky wasn't just acting, he was living the role. His real life became public property. America couldn't get enough. Long before reality TV was a thing, Ricky's family was the first. Then came a turning point in 1957. Ricky was 17 when he performed Fats Domino's I'm Walking on the family's TV show. His performance lit up the screen. Teenage girls all over the country went wild. The single sold over 1 million copies. Overnight, Ricky became the ultimate teenage heartthrob, but off-screen his life was spinning out of control. There were parties, girls, and fast cars. Fame opened every door, and Ricky didn't hesitate to walk through them. He had a natural charm, but also a wild side. He was well-mannered in public, but behind the scenes, he was rebellious. He started growing out his sideburns and slicking back his hair, small acts that drove his parents crazy. They still wanted to control his image. That same year, he released his first single under Imperial Records, Bebop Baby. It was a massive success, with 750,000 pre-orders even before release. When it hit stores, it passed 1 million sales and became a top 5 hit on both the pop and R&B charts. Ricky was no longer just a teen idol, he was a moneymaker. His debut album, Ricky, shot to the top of the charts. Being young and good-looking was suddenly big business. Record companies started chasing teen stars. Ricky proved it worked, and they followed. But Ricky was also falling into risky relationships, some that would have shocked his fans. One was with Mary Ann Gaba, who played his girlfriend on TV. Off-screen, their romance was real. Ricky later admitted they spent hours making out scandalous behavior for the 1950s. He even gave her a gold ring engraved to Mary Ann. Love Rick. She thought it meant they were serious. Ricky didn't. He was already moving on to other girls, like singer Lori Collins, who also became his songwriting partner. To the world, Ricky was the perfect clean-cut star. But in reality, he was a fast-living teenager, and very few people knew the truth. His parents, Ozzie and Harriet, were deeply worried. They weren't just worried parents, they were also his producers, managers, and gatekeepers. They disapproved of his many girlfriends. They believed that love would distract him from his career. Ozzie, especially, was strict. Even though Ricky made $500 a week as a teen, his father held on to the money and only gave him a small allowance. That control reached every part of Ricky's life. Any talk of engagements was quickly shut down. Serious relationships were discouraged. But Ricky was tired of being controlled. He started rebelling with secret girlfriends and wild parties. He was still the face of America's favorite TV family, but behind the scenes, he was drifting far from their grip. Ricky Nelson was just 17 when his debut album hit #1. The album, titled Ricky, came out in October 1957 and stayed at the top of the Billboard LP chart for 2 weeks. That made him the youngest artist ever to achieve that at the time. But this wasn't just a fluke. He was already a TV star, thanks to the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which millions of people watched every week. While Elvis dominated the radio, Ricky was winning over living rooms across the country. Songs like Bebop Baby and Have I Told You Lately That I Love You were already charting before the album even dropped. His success wasn't luck. It was part of a calculated plan, and the man behind that plan was Ozzie Nelson. As the show's producer, Ozzie had a vision. At the end of every episode, Ricky performed a brand new song. It wasn't just entertaining, it was a marketing goldmine. With 10 million weekly viewers, the exposure was unmatched. But when Ricky performed I'm Walking on the Show in April 1957, the song leaped to #4 on the charts. The B-side, A Teenager's Romance, did even better, reaching #2. That kind of success was unheard of. Ozzie carefully inserted Ricky's songs into the show's storyline and controlled where he appeared. He even refused to let Ricky go on the Ed Sullivan Show, choosing to keep all the spotlight in Dash House. Then came Poor Little Fool. In August 1958, it became the first song ever to top Billboard's brand new Hot 100 chart. That would have been enough to make history, but there was more. The song was written by 15-year-old Sharon Shealy. Ricky didn't even want to record it. It wasn't meant to be a single, but radio stations loved it. Imperial Records ignored Ricky's objections and released it. It became a massive hit, stayed at #1 for 2 weeks, and crossed over into country and R&B charts. That moment solidified Ricky's place in music history. His estate still makes money from that song. It's been covered by many artists, but only Ricky can say he was the first artist ever to top the Hot 100. Between 1957 and 1962, Ricky placed 20 songs in the top 40. Only Elvis had more hits during that time. His very first single, Bebop Baby, sold over 1 million copies. Before its release, it had $750,000 in pre-orders. His contract was just as impressive, $50,000 guaranteed over 5 years, along with full control of his music and album artwork. That was unheard of for someone his age. The money kept coming. His TV fame continued to boost his record sales. By 1960, the Ricky Nelson International Fan Club had 9,000 chapters all over the world. Ricky wasn't just wealthy, he was a global icon. In 1959, he also showed the world he could act. He starred alongside John Wayne and Dean Martin in Rio Bravo. His role as Colorado Ryan earned him a Golden Globe nomination for Most Promising Newcomer. But while critics praised his acting, his lifestyle started to show. Ricky was living big custom suits, flashy cars, exclusive nightclubs. He had a $5,000 monthly allowance, which would be about $50,000 today. The movie helped his career, but it also revealed just how much he was enjoying the high life. Fame didn't just bring success, it changed him. Ironically, 1961 brought one of his biggest hits. Travelin' Man was first offered to Sam Cooke, who turned it down. He didn't think the song suited him. Ricky took a chance and proved everyone wrong. The song hit #1 in April and sold over 1 million copies within weeks. The Beast's Hello Mary Lou became a hit too. 2 smash hits on one record. Ricky had a gift for spotting songs others overlooked. It was one of his final big victories. Before things started to go downhill, behind the scenes, Ricky was getting frustrated. The older musicians who played on his albums didn't respect rock and roll. Some flat out refused to play the way Ricky wanted. One even said to him, "Kid, this ain't music." Ricky decided to let his old band go. He formed a new group, filled with young musicians who understood and believed in the unique sound he was striving for. It came at a high cost, paying salaries, buying equipment, covering travel, but it gave him full creative control. Among these fresh faces was James Burton, who would eventually become a legend himself. But this move was about more than just music. Ricky wanted respect. He was tired of being pushed around like a puppet. Still, no matter how much control he gained, it couldn't prepare him for what came next. In 1964, the Beatles arrived in America and took the country by storm. Their performance on The Ed Sullivan Show in February was a cultural earthquake. By April, they dominated the Billboard charts, holding the top 5 spots. Even Elvis was struggling, and Ricky was no different. That same year, his song For You barely made it into the top 40. The magic that once defined him was fading. The British invasion didn't just bring a new sound, it completely rewrote the rules. By the time Rick Nelson met 16-year-old Chris Harmon on Christmas Day in 1961, he was already a music star. At 21, Rick was a household name, and Chris came from a famous family, daughter of football hero Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox, and sister to future TV star Mark Harmon. Together, they seemed like the perfect Hollywood couple, young, attractive, and used to the spotlight. But behind the fairy tale image lay a troubled and painful reality. Rick faced intense pressure early on. His father, Ozzie, controlled all of his finances. Chris, who had grown up in luxury, wanted to maintain a lavish lifestyle. Rick tried to meet her expectations, but the expenses quickly overwhelmed him. Year after year, money vanished into expensive homes, cars, designer clothes, and exotic vacations. By the late 1970s, Rick's fortune had dried up. The dream had collapsed. When the two married on April 20, 1963, it wasn't a romantic union. Chris was already pregnant, and her Catholic parents insisted on a quick wedding. Rick, who wasn't Catholic, was forced to sign an agreement to raise their children in the church. It wasn't a choice, it was a condition. He even had to take religious classes and go through the motions to keep everyone happy. The wedding, meant to be a celebration, was really about pressure and public image. That tension never let up. Oddly enough, Rick's parents adored Chris. They had rejected every other girlfriend he'd brought home, but not her. They were thrilled to merge the Nelson and Harmon names. Chris had the right look, elegant, connected, and from a respected Hollywood family. On the surface, it looked like a flawless match, but the reality quickly proved otherwise. Rick, who had always lived under his father's strict budgeting, now had a wife who demanded everything money could buy. They didn't have a financial plan, they just spent freely. When Rick's career began to cool in the mid-1970s, the spending didn't slow down. Chris wanted him home, but Rick had to keep touring to pay the bills. The pressure stretched him thin both financially and emotionally. The glamorous marriage that had impressed the world ended up costing over $1 million in legal fees. After getting married, Chris joined Rick on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, playing herself and even contributing to the family income. But 2 paychecks just led to even more spending. Neither of them knew how to manage money. They were surrounded by a team of agents, assistants, and accountants, yet no one put a stop to the financial spiral. Rick, once disciplined with money, found himself overspending to maintain a lifestyle that was rapidly unraveling. Chris, feeling stuck in a failing marriage and a pretend TV world, began to distance herself. But by then, it was already too late. The glamorous Hollywood fantasy had turned into a slow-moving disaster. In 1965, Rick and Chris co-starred in the film Love and Kisses, directed by Rick's father. The story followed 2 teenagers who eloped and had to live with the groom's parents. Though it was meant to be lighthearted, the reality behind the scenes was far darker. Their personal struggles were already seeping into their work. Critics thought casting the couple was clever, but few realized how painfully close the movie's plot mirrored their real life. Rick played a high school student, even though he was 25. Chris's performance didn't receive much praise. Meanwhile, their marriage was crumbling. Ozzie used the film to highlight private tensions, projecting real-life family drama onto the screen. It made the film feel awkward, uneasy, and eerily prophetic. By 1969, Rick wanted to escape the past. He launched the Stone Canyon Band to reinvent himself with a fresh sound blending country and rock. Before that was popular, he brought in Randy Meisner, who would later become a founding member of the Eagles. The band had promise, but the timing worked against them. Rick, once a major headliner, found himself playing tiny clubs for little pay. Meisner eventually quit, frustrated by the lack of money and progress. Albums like Rick Sings Nelson and In Concert were artistically ahead of their time but didn't sell. Rick pursued artistic freedom even as his fame and finances slipped away. He was determined to be seen as a serious musician, even if it cost him everything, and it nearly did. The breaking point came on October 15, 1971, at Madison Square Garden. Rick performed at a rock and roll show, expecting admiration. Instead, he was booed. Trying to modernize his image, he dropped the Y from Ricky and performed Honky Tonk Women, but the crowd wanted his old hits. Some blamed police interference in the audience, but Rick took the message personally. They didn't want the new him. He walked off the stage, humiliated, and watched the rest of the show from backstage. He was eventually persuaded to return and play his classics. The crowd finally cheered, but the emotional damage was irreversible. Yet, from that low point came something powerful. In 1972, Rick wrote Garden Party. The song was honest and deeply personal. Its message was simple: you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself. It resonated with audiences. climbing to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earning a gold certification. Rick had his first top 10 hit in nearly a decade, and fans who had forgotten him were singing along again, but the success was short-lived. Follow-up singles like Palace Guard failed to chart. By 1974, his record label didn't know what direction to take him in. Albums like Windfall flopped, he took gigs at amusement parks and accepted minor TV roles. Eventually, MCA Records dropped him. Garden Party became both a triumphant comeback and a final bow. Once the golden boy of American pop, Rick's life had spiraled out of control by the mid-1970s. His marriage to Chris was only surviving on the surface. Rick kept touring to afford their extravagant lifestyle, private schools, luxury homes, endless bills. But the more he worked, the more disconnected he became. Chris felt abandoned. Rick felt trapped. Their talks became fights. The once happy home turned into a war zone. In 1977, after another long tour, Rick returned expecting comfort. Instead, he found himself locked out. Chris had moved all of his belongings to a rental property. When he arrived, she was inside with 2 Los Angeles Rams cheerleaders. Rick was stunned and embarrassed. That moment made it clear. Their relationship was beyond repair. Chris said she did it for their children, citing Rick's alleged drug use. His team denied it, but the damage was irreversible. Their marriage was over. In 1980, they attempted a fresh start. Rick purchased Errol Flynn's old Mulholland Drive mansion for $750,000. But Chris wanted him to quit music and turn to acting. Rick couldn't. Drowning in debt, he had to keep performing to survive. The mansion didn't bring peace. Instead, it became a source of anxiety. Rumors spread that it was haunted, strange noises, flickering lights, and the financial strain kept growing. The so-called dream home quickly turned into another nightmare. Their divorce got nasty. Chris accused Rick of drug use and being a danger to their children. Rick fired back, saying Chris drank too much and left the kids in the care of house staff. The court battle dragged on for 5 long years. More than $1 million was spent on legal fees. Both were emotionally shattered, and their children were caught in the middle, forced to watch their parents fall apart. By late 1982, it finally ended. The divorce was finalized. Rick was ordered to pay $4,000 a month in child support. He had joint custody of their 4 children, who were between the ages of 8 and 19. But the lengthy legal war had drained him financially. To stay afloat, Rick kept performing non-stop. The emotional toll never left him. His health declined. His spirit dimmed. The joy he once had seemed lost forever. By 1985, Rick was desperate for a new chapter. But he had one major problem. He was terrified of flying. Still, he refused to travel by bus. So, he bought a used plane for $118,000, 1944, Douglas DC-3, that had once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis. Rick thought it would offer privacy and save money. But the aircraft was in bad shape. The engines were unreliable. Mechanical issues were constant. Sometimes the crew had to push the plane off the runway manually. Everyone was scared of it. Guitarist Bobby Neal's wife pleaded with him not to fly. Bassist Patrick Woodward had already been through 2 emergency landings. Pianist Andy Chapin didn't want to board either. But Rick ignored the warnings. He needed the money. Canceling wasn't an option. In September, an engine failure caused him to miss a major opportunity at Friday. Then, on December 31, 1985, the plane faced more mechanical delays. Still, Rick got on board. They were headed to Dallas for a New Year's Eve concert. Somewhere over Texas, smoke filled the cabin. It was so thick the pilots couldn't read their instruments. The main pilot, Brad Rank, had to fly blind with his head out the window. At around 5:14 p.m., the plane crashed in a field just 2 miles from a runway near Dallas. Witnesses saw black smoke trailing from the aircraft before it clipped trees and burst into flames. The crash site was a scene of devastation, with wreckage scattered over a span of 150 yards. Tragically, only the pilots made it out alive by escaping through the cockpit windows. Everyone else on board, 7 people, including Rick Nelson, perished in the fiery disaster. Rick was just 45 years old at the time. His fiancée, Helen Blair, was also on board, along with 5 members of his band and crew: sound engineer Donald Clark Russell, pianist Andy Chapin, drummer Rick Invelt, guitarist Bobby Neal, and bassist Patrick Woodward. The crash was so violent that officials had to rely on autopsies to confirm the identities of the victims. The news sent shockwaves through the music industry. Rick had once been one of the brightest teen idols of his era, and now, just hours before the start of 1986, he was gone. What followed was an even more troubling situation. Rick's financial affairs were in disarray. He had previously divorced his wife, Kristen Harmon, and the couple shared 4 children: Tracy Gunner, Matthew, and Sam. Though Rick was engaged to Helen Blair, she had been excluded from his will. So too were Kristen and Rick's mother. To make matters worse, his estate was reportedly around $1 million in debt. The result of lavish spending, legal expenses, and the high cost of maintaining the aging DC-3 aircraft involved in the crash. Initially, many believed Rick had passed away without leaving a will. Kristen claimed she couldn't locate one and attempted to assume control over the estate. However, Rick's brother, David Nelson, later presented a will dated just 4 months prior to the tragedy. This document changed the entire situation. It named only Rick's for children as beneficiaries and appointed David as executor of the estate. Even so, with such heavy debts, there was uncertainty about whether anything would be left to inherit. Kristen wasn't willing to accept the situation without a fight. Despite their divorce, she tried to claim a portion of Rick's life insurance, and also legally contested David's role as executor. What followed was a bitter legal battle. Allegations surfaced accusing both parties of past drug use, irresponsible parenting, and reckless spending. Many of these claims stemmed from years prior. By then, over $1 million had already been consumed by the divorce proceedings. Now, more lawyers were involved, circling whatever was left of the estate. Then came a revelation that shocked everyone. Rick had a son the public barely knew about. His name was Eric Jude Crew, born in 1980 after a brief relationship between Rick and a woman named Georgine Crew. Initially, Rick denied paternity, but a court-mandated blood test in 1981 confirmed he was indeed the father. He was ordered to pay $400 a month in child support, but reports say those payments eventually stopped. In his will, Rick claimed that paternity was still in dispute and intentionally left Eric out. After Rick's passing, Georgine sought her son's rightful portion of the estate, but the courts upheld Rick's will, leaving Eric with nothing. At the same time, Helen Blair's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, arguing that the crash was the result of poor aircraft maintenance. Families of the other deceased passengers soon joined the legal action. More lawsuits followed. Creditors pursued unpaid debts. Georgine continued to fight for Eric's rights, and Kristen battled for a share of the life insurance. The estate was in chaos, with multiple parties scrambling for whatever remained. What most overlooked, however, was that Rick's most valuable asset wasn't in physical possessions or cash, it was in his music. His song, catalog, and royalty earnings, especially from digital platforms like streaming services, held significant value. The problem was that record labels were quietly undercutting the estate. In 2011, the Nelson estate filed a massive lawsuit against Capitol Records, seeking between $100 and $250 million. The suit accused the label of hiding unmatched income, funds that weren't assigned to any specific artist, and shortchanging Rick's estate on digital music revenue. Capitol Records was allegedly applying outdated deductions, such as breakage fees that once applied to damaged physical media, like CDs or vinyl, to digital downloads. The estate called this fraudulent. Millions were being lost due to these outdated accounting practices. To make matters worse, Capitol reportedly refused to provide full audit reports, leaving Rick's heirs unable to verify the actual earnings owed to them. In 2014, the lawsuit was settled. Capitol agreed to an undisclosed payout and committed to more transparent royalty reporting in the future. The estate's legal team hailed it as a landmark victory. But the legal fights weren't over. In 2020, the estate filed a new lawsuit, this time against Sony Music. This case focused on international streaming revenues. Sony was accused of slashing royalties through so-called intercompany fees, where its own offices charged one another and reduced payouts to artists. As a result, as much as 68% of some of Rick's royalties were gone before the estate received anything. The eventual settlement was substantial, $12.7 million in damages, plus a 36% increase in future streaming royalty rates. Finally, Rick Nelson's children began to see the financial legacy their father had worked a lifetime to build.